Well, first of all, thank you for being here. I bet that more people will join us, but just not to waste time that is allocated to the seminar, as I think that the debate and the conversation is going to be absolutely interesting. I am going to start right away. If somebody misses my introduction, it's not a big deal, as my main task today is to welcome you at the Beeper seminar titled Hijacked States, Fighting Windmills and the Value of the Rule of Law. This seminar is part of a series which is linked to a project, a research project called Human Trafficking Initiative at SAIS. The project is very ambitious. It aims at bridging the gap between practitioners and academics, and it stems from the relationship between Alexandra Malangone and myself over the course of the year. This is our third year of activity. Roller coaster, as all research projects. A lot of work done on fundings and other aspects that, of course, are not strictly scientific, but they end up being highly relevant, if not an irrenounceable element of our activity. But again, because this project aims at bridging this gap, tonight I am very honored to welcome two experts in human rights, anti-mafia prosecution, and counter-trafficking, in order for them to discuss their experience together with Alexandra Malangone. Alexandra is here at SAIS, an associate fellow, and she co-coordinates, again, as I anticipated, the HT initiative, and of course, she is a human rights lawyer. Alexandra will be moderating this debate, and also she will be managing the Q&A session. For those that are following from home, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A chat. For those of you who are here, please simply raise your hands and you will be given the floor for your question. However, before we proceed with the seminar, I would like to welcome from Washington, if I'm not mistaken, Samuel George. Samuel is a documentary filmmaker with the Bertelsmann Foundation, but he's also a SAIS grad. And if I am not mistaken, he's also about to conclude his PhD at SAIS Washington. I know. You see, I did my research.
Yeah.
So Sam George's documentary investigates the impact of Chinese investments and activity in the Western Balkans. And the documentary focuses specifically on Serbia and Montenegro. Sam, thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it very much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Great. Now, Sam, a full screening of your documentary is scheduled for later this semester. I believe it's going to be in May here at SAIS Europe. Somebody can definitely the 4th of May here at SAIS Europe. So I invite you all to attend the screening of Sam's documentary. But the story that you tell in your film is actually such a perfect introduction to the topic of tonight's seminar that we invited you to open it with a trailer of your documentary and hopefully having you sharing a few words with us. So in a nutshell, what is your documentary about and why was it so important to tell this story?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very, very much for the invitation. It's an honor to be able to speak with these dignitaries and experts. And for me, like you said, to be back at SAIS, it's a very special place to me. We called it the Bologna Center then, but I was at the SAIS Bologna campus in 2011 before doing the DC campus. And, you mentioned I'm a PhD student. You said I'm close to finishing my dissertation. I hope you're right, because it's been a long process, but it's been a wonderful experience. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to share this film. And I think that, you basically hit on most of my introductory comments. So what I'd like to do is just jump right in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show a 2-minute trailer to the film, and then I'll come back and talk about it for a minute or two. And hopefully that can in some ways set the table for the subsequent discussion. So this is the trailer to our Bertelsmann Foundation documentary, Tinderbox Belt and Road. And it's just going to be a minute as I switch to share my screen.
Life here seems like deep, quiet ocean, but under the water are sharks ready to bite.
Sad neće da nas primi na razgovor, jer ovu našu državu Srbiju sve se prodaje.
Gradit ćemo fabrike i gradit ćemo fabrike i gradit ćemo nove fabrike.
Small and poor countries want to get rich. Who's going to help do that?
If it's not Chinese money, then there's no money.
Chinese say they're going to build a road. A year later, you have a road.
Tu su u vazduhu, vi imate trenutno dišete PM čestice koje se lepe za vaša pluća.
They are transferring dirty technology from China abroad.
Razum koji može da odobri.
No one knows the terms of the deal and who got kickbacks.
No electric, no water, no medicine, only work.
It's the accommodation where you would not really put animals in.
China itself is not a democracy.
They roll with the punches, they go along with the place. They accept it as is and then take advantage of it.
China just exploited the political and geostrategic opportunity they saw in a corrupted government.
Nema nazad, nema u prošlost, idemo napred, idemo u budućnost.
Elections are not the proof that the democracy exists.
If we cannot pay the debt, then China could ask for part of our territory.
Then when China says that, well, you need to vote a certain way on the issue of Taiwan, you are going to.
What the experts call death trap diplomacy.
What China does in Serbia is a test for Europe.
Democracy is not a permanent condition.
All right, so there is the trailer for Tinderbox Belt and Road. So what is this film about? Now, hopefully you want to come see it. Hopefully you saw that trailer and say, you know what, I'm going to be there May 4th. And I hope you do come because I'm excited to be back on campus and we're going to do a happy hour afterwards. And it should be a nice event. But we can talk a little bit about what's going on here. And the idea is that in recent years, Chinese investment has poured into Southeast Europe. And it's, on the one hand, it's good, right? It's offering access to desperately needed development financing. But this documentary asks, at what cost? Because the conditions around the cash, they raise concerns related to democracy, labor standards, and debt. And this is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is an extension of the approach that China has already taken in Africa and Latin America. So why is this suddenly becoming appealing to European countries? And what will that mean for the continent's future? And, my interest on this topic, it really does go back to my time at SAIS. I was at that point in the Latin American Studies Department. And in 2010, the big question, the big interest was about the spiking Chinese investment in countries big and small in Latin America. And again, we saw clear benefits to that money and we saw a number of challenges. And I actually worked with Professor Mazza, who's now at Bologna, on this issue. And when we said, wow, what's happening in Latin America? Well, that's really similar to what was happening when China was investing and trading with Africa in the previous decade. And, now here we are 10 years after what was happening in Latin America, and it appears that this model is now coming into Europe itself. So we felt like it's really important to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what are the long-term implications. And in this film, I think there are three key points that are relevant to the topic at hand today. The film starts with a section that's shot in the city of Bor in eastern Serbia. And this has always been a mining town for copper and other commodities. We know how important access to commodities is for a growing China. But here in Bor, their mine was going bankrupt. And a Chinese state-owned enterprise came in and they saved it. And when they saved it, they invested $1.2 billion in that mine. And the recipient of this investment was the government of President Alexandra Vučić. He's been president since 2017. And he's been consolidating power. He's got a spotty record on press freedom. Democracy isn't very transparent. But he's kind of staking his claim on this idea that, look, I can bring investment and I can bring jobs. But at what cost? In exchange for that massive investment in the mine, the Chinese state-owned enterprise is basically running the town now. The terms of the deal are not transparent. The mining has rapidly expanded, and Bor is now one of the most polluted cities in Europe. And you start to get to the heart of one of the issues here, and that's that if you want to get this kind of investment from the EU or the US or the World Bank or some other Western development financing, there's going to be a ton of strings attached. And if you don't want to address those strings, if you don't want public tenders, you don't want oversight or reforms, you're going to be interested in opportunities coming from China where none of that is required. Let me get into this idea of a captured state, because those loans and investments, they're not gifts. They're loans. And this brings up, especially when you're dealing with small, not particularly rich country, it creates the potential of a debt trap. And in the film, we go to Montenegro on Serbia's southeast border to look at that. Here's a country where the previous government took nearly $1 billion loan for a highway. That, as one journalist told me, or actually the current prime minister of Montenegro told me, it goes from nowhere to nowhere, but it cost $1 billion, and it left Montenegro deeply in debt to China. And the question then comes up, well, what happens if Montenegro can't pay? I mean, that's a lot of money for a country to begin with, especially for a highway that's not really generating that much revenue. And the answer to that is not particularly clear, because again, the terms of the loan are a state secret, but you have experts in Montenegro that say, look, there's language in this loan that we could have to forfeit assets or territory if we can't pay. Now that maybe it never comes to that, but that's quite a threat to be dangling out there. And it certainly leaves Montenegro in a difficult position if it, say, wants to vote a different way than China would like it to at the UN. Then there's a final issue in the film, and I think that really hits at the topic at hand today. And that's the building of a tire factory in a town called Zrenjanin in Serbia. Apologies for the mispronunciation. I practiced many times, still can't get it right. But this is a massive tire factory, and it's again something that President Vučić wants. It's a situation as well, however, where they've ceded a tremendous amount of power and control to Linglong Tire Factory. That's a major Chinese tire factory company that's building it. And what the critics are saying is that on this site where they've been building for a couple of years now, Serbian labor laws are not being observed. They're not applicable. That instead workers are being brought over from East Asia and from Southeast Asia. They've had their passports taken away, and they've been made to work long hours while staying in really poor housing conditions. We speak to people in the film who observe these conditions, and they say, hey, look, to me, this is a concentration camp. And to me, this is human trafficking. These are people misled about the work that they would be doing, who they would be doing it for. They've traveled a great length and are now stuck in conditions that they can't leave. And that's an important story to tell, because it's not a unique story, that we've seen these kind of labor concerns in Chinese sites in Latin America and on Chinese sites in Africa. But what makes it so important, I think what makes it so shocking, is that it's happening in Europe, which, I mean, in theory, is supposed to be this global leader on labor rights. So I think the feeling is that this is something we need to talk about, something to be aware of. And you know, just as a final point, I want to be as clear as possible that the intention of this project is not to bash Chinese people or to be a part of China bashing. I mean, the people that are most punished by this approach to labor are the Chinese people themselves. So it's in sympathy and solidarity. And the key point here is it takes two to tango. China didn't invade the Balkans, right? They were invited in. On the one hand, by a government that maybe didn't want to make reforms, but did want the investment. But on the other hand, part of the story is the absence of the EU and the US in these regions. So what do you want them to do? It's like one of the experts says in the film, if you want a highway, you can go to the World Bank and they'll do a bunch of studies, and maybe it'll take 10 years and maybe it'll never happen. But if you go to China, a year later, you have a road. So these are the dynamics that the film addresses, and I'm really excited to bring this film to SAIS Europe on May 4th, and I hope you come hang out with me. And with that, I want to pass it back, and I look forward to the rest of this conversation.
That's great. Thank you, Sam. Well, a round of applause for Sam. We will definitely join you on May 4th to see the full version of the documentary. I think your words shed light on the link between the human trafficking seminar and the topic of the documentary. It is the quality of the democratic system and the level of protection of the rule of law that may guarantee or not the possibility to actually enforce human rights standards, and therefore also with regard to human trafficking. Of course, human trafficking does imply a lot of criminal experience and is relevant in terms of criminal law. So without further ado, let me introduce one of the two speakers of tonight, which by no surprise is an expert in criminal law. More specific, he is currently sits as the anti-mafia prosecutor at the Special Prosecution Office of the Slovak General Prosecution Office, and he has been holding this office since 2004. So again, we are looking forward a very interesting insight from the criminal and investigative perspective. And then we welcome Rachel Witkin, Director of Counter-Trafficking and Publications at the Helen Bamber Foundation, and an independent international expert, and the Helen Bamber Foundation, or brother, the Counter-Trafficking and Publications is an NGO based in the UK and has a multidisciplinary approach. I thought that was relevant to the fact that tonight we will tackle human trafficking as a public crime, and again, from multiple angles and multiple perspectives. Alexandra, the moderator, the floor is yours. Again, as I said before, Q&A, questions can be asked in the Q&A box or for the people in the room directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Samuel. You may know that last year, one of our speakers at the Human Trafficking Initiative series was Maja Anđelković from the NGO Astra from Serbia, who is, one of the lawyers who have actually met the survivors at Linglong, who have published a recent report on Would You Really Buy This? And who is one of very important human rights lawyers in the region, behind also the case on Zolecic versus others, versus Russia and Azerbaijan, tried in front of the European Court of Human Rights. So it's really nice to see this synergy to our previous human trafficking initiative speakers as well. And why, of course, are the dynamics that you're describing in Serbia relevant also for Europe is the question that is what we would like to demonstrate also by having invited speakers from Slovakia and from the UK as well. So you have mentioned very briefly a word, captured state. I think that could be used as a synonym also for the term that we're using in the title called a hijacked state. What is this term, hijacked state, and why would it be important to clarify, and what that state means to Peter Kysel, who is anti-mafia prosecutor in Slovakia for the past 20 years, and who has been working within a special anti-mafia prosecution office, where its head is currently basically convicted, Peter, is that right, for having created a mafia type of organized criminal group. Its former head. Peter, what does a term hijacked state mean to you in this context?
First, thank you very much for invitation for this evening and for this event, of course. It's a new experience for me to talk before such new people. For me, I'm not expert for the criminal law, fortunately, because it's much more easier to talk with people who are not an expert all the time and stand before the court. So I try to explain somehow for the normal people, not for the lawyers. Yeah, sorry, for others. Yeah. But when we're talking about the theme of this event, we were talking about the hijacked state. I just can explain and to show you such an aspect from my country, from Slovakia. Well, as Alexandra explained, I'm a prosecutor from the Special Prosecution Office. It's a type of office which is tackling with the most serious crime across the whole country. We have only just one office, just short introducing to understand why is it so interesting and important. We're dealing with the mafia crimes for organized groups, which is in high level, such as Italian mafia. We tackling also with the cases regarding to extremism, terrorism, premeditated murders, all types of corruption, and also serious economical crimes, including is money laundering crimes, and also when we are talking about organized criminal groups, we are talking also about trafficking with human beings. And if we are talking about hijacked state, can you imagine that your country is leading this representative, which was created under the normal election, and the position across the state level was in this position was appointed persons who are graduated, who are experienced, who are a member of the, in my office, prosecutors or policemen, police officers, and these people are leading all the offices across the country. In my country, after the 3 years, we have been dealing with the cases, sensitive cases, which are tackling all of these positions across the country, because now we were talking about professionals who were leading the country, and all of them was a part of big corruption model, which was such a new form of organized crime, which we have never touched before. All of these people was involved in one part of covering the crimes who was committed with normal perpetrator, if I can say it like this way. Other part was, other part of this person was involved directly in racketeering of the people on entertainment, or everybody who has the problem with the law enforcement agencies. So, for example, if somebody was involved in a public procurement, there was prepared a scheme how to share the money for the businessmen, for the members of the state, for some members of the political parties. We recognize that almost every public requirement which was touched to IT sector was manipulated in this procurement. We are talking about money who was oversized 100% over the normal contract. So, can you imagine that your country is leading with the persons who are never touched the normal legal procurement? You have conditions for the people who are involved to this sector told us that we avoid to touch the country to the level of the government, because all of these cases was leading with using the bribery, using the avoid legal procurement, and we was unhappy because we didn't want to touch to this scheme, and we didn't want to touch committed any crimes. Yeah, but our colleagues who was involved, they just committed the crimes and used the money to have some such a contracts. Now,
Peter, and when you mention our colleagues, you mean police, prosecutors? Who do you mean?
when I'm talking about colleagues, it was perfectly for the people who was in a business, and they are after a couple of months, they try to find connections with my colleagues in prosecutional office, with my colleagues in police across the police officers, and they just share the money for them to cover the crimes. As you mentioned before, my previous boss was convinced for the bribery scheme, and now is before the court for the other two cases as a member of organized criminal group, as a covering the persons who was touched with my office, and we try to convince them. So he just do legal operations. The legal operations, it was illegal to avoid leading investigation to them. It is ongoing cases, so I don't talk more. But I think it's ironical that you have an office which was created to fight against corruption and organized criminal groups, and the boss of the office is doing the same way. Yeah, and it was quite difficult to find a way how to lead investigation and to put together the people who are able to be involved, so.
And Peter, of course, when we talk about organized crime, we understand that this is a polycrime. Also, human trafficking is a polycrime phenomena. Why do polycrime phenomena such as human trafficking flourish in a hijacked state?
Yeah. If we are talking about organized criminal groups or organized crime, you need to be prepared to accept that this is impossible to do it if the normal legal officials or normal state organizations are completely effective. If you have an unstable state, if you have an unstable governments, if the government is changing in a very short periods, if you have a chaos, this is a way how the organized criminal group are growing up, because they can find the people who are able to take money, to do anything which is better for these criminal groups. Because if you have an unstable state, you have maybe a lower money from the officers, because they earn not too many money. But you have other possibilities which can be used by these groups. And the most simplified is, we can offer you more money. How much would you like to do something for us? At the beginning, it's 50,000 euros, for example, is enough for you. If you have a salary, maybe 2,000 or 3,000, maybe 5, it could be a good money, because it will be only just for one event, another event. 50,000 is enough for you again and again and again. And this opened the door for something different. And back to the trafficking with human beings. This is the most better job if I will be a member of the criminal group and I will be not involved to the illicit trafficking with drugs. To traffic with the human beings is the very elegant form of committed a crime, because everybody is fighting against the drugs, everybody is committing against the terrorists, everybody is against the murders, But you have organizations which are prepare conditions how to use or how to create, how to do the business to be more efficient. And you need to earn more money if you involve more people. And if you would like to earn more money, you need to be clever. If we are talking about trafficking with human beings, it's not only just for sexual exploitation, which is the oldest form, which we are talking about the human trafficking. But we are talking about the trafficking with human beings for labor exploitation, which is the most efficient way how to earn the money, because you can ask the governments for the money, as we talked with our colleagues who in this documentary. We can use it a very different way, because we need to have a lot of cooperative persons who are in a different part of the state. You need a customs service, you need somebody in the embassies of the other countries to put the bribery, to falsificate maybe some certificates for labor eligibility. Maybe you can use some money for the labor officers who are controlling some places. You can maybe pay the money for the policeman to be covered, and nobody ask you to or find such a people involved in some companies. And after that, you were created a system when you can rotate it a lot of people, and these people earn a lot of money for you, for the organizations, and it will be as more efficient as many times you can repeat it.
Exactly, Peter. I mean, you've mentioned it. We often hear it also in different international fora that human trafficking is more profitable than drugs and more profitable than arms, and that is organized crime, and it is built on exploitation of people for economic gain. Yet, why are we not able to see it exactly for it is, but we get confused by how it manifests?
It's a good question. Maybe I try to explain because a lot of people is profitable from this business. Yeah, because you have owners of the companies who need to involve as cheapest workers as it possible. This is the way why they are not maybe so cooperative with the official officers, police, etc. You have a lot of people who are profit from this, and maybe if we are talking about organized group, we are talking also about people maybe who are involved in government, maybe who are involved at the highest level of political stages, and this is covered by some legislation which is maybe sometimes unclear. There are some gaps, and these organizations use it very effectively. But if they don't know about these gaps, about these possibilities, it is not possible to do it. So you need to think about it that if this is such a big business, that nobody will be care about this business. And if from the outside it seems to be everything legal, everything is paid by the taxes, there are some certifications, there are some no problems with the legalization. There are companies which is as a contractors. We have a premises. It is not only just fictive. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are visible. There are cars. There are stamps. There are invoices. Yeah, between them. So everything seems to be legal, and everybody needs as cheap as workers as it possible because the companies would like to earn more money. So maybe therefore it is not so visible. And if it's some connections, like in this documentary from the Serbia, there is a connections to the government, it is possible that it is more profitable also for other people who are leading the country, and they try to prepare conditions who will be better for them. Maybe it's not a pattern for other country, of course, because there are a lot of differences. But in my country, there was a lot of similar patterns that I seems to from this short video. So.
Peter, you are one of the prosecutors in the country who promote a lot multi-agency cooperation and coordination in fighting organized crime, and particularly in fighting human trafficking. Because of course, often we discover things which are the tip of the iceberg through what is visible to us, and that may be exactly the situation of the workers. How does a prosecutor like you fight organized crime in a state that has been hijacked or has been captured or has been sometimes giving you the frustrations of the windmill, so to say, both by prosecuting those cases, but also upholding the rule of law and upholding the rights of those people who have been violated through the abuse that they have been through?
Oh. Thanks for this question. It's not so easy to find a simple answer, but from my perspective, well, as I was appointed as a prosecutor, from this point I just need to follow the rule of law, and if I recognize that there's a problem with my colleagues across my system, you try to find a way how to avoid it and to fight again. And it's quite good that you can recognize the people who are inside of the offices, of different police offices in my country, different prosecutional offices, maybe in such a cooperative agencies, and most of them would like to do it appropriate way. So you just to try to connect these people together, and everybody need to do his job or her job for 100%, not less, not more. It's enough. And if you put these people together and find the links, it is possible to find against anybody. And when we are talking about fight to the windmills, yeah, that's like a period, because sometimes you can need to rebuild some multi-agencies cooperations between psychologists and between NGOs and police officers and prosecutional offices, and also to explain the court that this is needful for us. We are just cooperating with the forensic experts and try to find a way how to put these knowledges together. But after the 10 years, it was completely everything more or less destroyed, and you can find that there are completely new people. Don't know what to do, but they would like to do something. But they are the leaders who are not care about how to do it. So that's like a Windmills, yeah. And you try to find another people to try to find a way how to do it. And if you recognize that a lot of people are involved in organized crime, you need to also find a way how to communicate with the people, not to show what you are doing, what is in ongoing cases, maybe to find a way how to do it better or more efficient. And the way is that if you are talking with the people who are thinking the same way like you, it is about something like inside power to have that you are not alone. There is a lot of people who like to follow the rule of the state, and that's a way how to do it. So simplified and never give up.
So the trick is in finding them, right?
Yeah.
Finding them across the sectors.
But usually the people who are thinking the same way somehow find to way together, yeah, to meet one to one, or one group to another group, and you can find that it is possible to do it. But it's like I said before, never give up, because if you recognize inside that this is impossible, it is not doing like this, and I'm just going away because it's impossible to do it. Well, can you imagine that nurse or a medical doctor that you are before you and on the operation and I am not do it, and they just go away? So why me?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Well, I'll move to Rachel now, because of course Rachel for years has been fighting for improved assistance and protection of trafficked persons in guaranteeing their access to justice. And she has done so by being invested in the improvement of procedures and processes and methodologies, and in promoting multi-agency cooperation and coordination response from the point of view and from the side of the survivor, of the trafficking victim. Why are, in your view, Rachel, processes of multi-agency cooperation the key to improving the substance of our response?
Well, good evening. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at John Hopkins University on this beautiful Bologna evening to talk about this subject. Just to set it in a little bit of context, I work in the Helen Bamber Foundation in London, which is a multidisciplinary organization working with men and women and people of other genders who have been trafficked for different forms of exploitation and who come from all over the world. And I've been working with survivors since the mid-90s and have learned a lot in the course of doing so about being able to look at the situation from the survivor viewpoint and learning so much from survivors in that process. What's really clear, especially now, as we have countries which are working towards in this situation, a very dramatic situation, in the situations such as the UK, more of an erosion or departing of international norms, laws, and relationships. It's more important than ever that we have multi-agency cooperation and a multidisciplinary response to survivors' needs and their risks. And so it's really important to make sure that systems are in place. So for victims of trafficking, as Alex knows very well, because we worked on it together, there is the National Referral Mechanism Handbook, which is actually, it looks very large, but it's very easy to read. It's all color-coded, and you can move about to find out how to work with adults and children. And it's for the 57 member states of the OSCE who should or are in the process of getting national referral mechanisms in place. And so this now provides the system for that. In 2004, the OSCE said, we need to have a referral mechanism in every country because this situation is really bad. And at that time, I was working with refugees and finding survivors in the system of trafficking. And it was very, very early days at that time. And so the next iteration of the call for national referral mechanisms came in 2022 with this book that took quite a few years of consultation with survivor leaders, with experts from across the world in all disciplines, to say, this is how we do this system now. So every single person who is a victim of trafficking must have the 4 pillars of the NRM, which are identification and protection, access to individual support, long-term and services, social inclusion, and of course, criminal justice and redress. And so this book has a lot of information about how multi-agency actors and multidisciplinary professionals can hold together in order to prevent trafficking and to work with victims of trafficking. Because what you find out on the front line is that once you have very vulnerable people who you're working with, they can easily there's easily more vulnerability created through the othering of them and the marginalization that they suffer and the poverty that they have. And so if, like us, you work with survivors for example, 5 or more years, you see re-trafficking risks and other forms of crime risks arising far further than just the initial sort of process. So down the line, after some years. And so legal protection and access to justice and support, which is really like trusting with a professional who makes a proper relationship, is really important. And that professional needs to make an external team around that person to keep them safe, because they're at huge risk after trafficking. And so the fusion of academics, practitioners, and survivor leaders and other experts is really key to making this successful, even when we're in a very shaky context in the world, like you said.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And going again to the people, as Peter said, if I wanted to be a trafficker, it would be so efficient and so profitable to, concentrate on exploiting people. In terms of protection and assistance and identification of someone who may be trafficked, who may be actually subjected to this type of treatment, we see serious human rights violations. What we want to do is, on one hand, pursue the criminals, on the other hand, make sure that there is a proper restoration, access to assistance, and these two approaches go hand in hand. Now, you have been teaching trauma-informed care for non-clinicians, both at the universities in the UK, but also in your other work, even through the NRM mechanism. People usually become a little bit, maybe a little bit not sure what do you mean exactly, because we say, okay, trauma-informed care for non-clinicians, what does it exactly mean? Do we want to mingle with the work of the psychologists, or I'm not an expert on that? Can you tell us more, why is this approach so important, why this method can be learned, so that we can really all who on a frontline level engaged with survivors and with trafficking victims can pursue these both paths, access to justice, investigation and prosecution, but at the same time, identification and assistance?
Yeah, so it's really important, at the moment, I think for some years now, people have been talking about trauma-informed. So what does trauma-informed mean? And it's a developing area, actually. But when it comes to the knowledge needed for all professionals who work in any sort of context with survivors, all of them just need to be aware of basic facts about trauma, because slavery and trafficking just distorts all human relationships. And so a person that you're working with has lost all connection to positive human reassurance. And the destruction of that and the impact of that is very profound. So because I work with a health team, they will see injuries that you can't imagine, internal injuries, external injuries, and also prevalent in this group are diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression. People are also very psychologically subjugated to traffickers. And as we know, they live in fear of traffickers for long afterwards. Sometimes that fear is very pressing because the traffickers can and will get hold of their family members and traffic or even kill them. In other ways, we also work, sometimes with people who've been through juju or voodoo ritual ceremonies for trafficking in West African countries, or have folklore or beliefs instilled about their trafficker, and they're very, very frightened of that, like terrified of supernatural consequences as well as the consequences of their trafficker finding that they've spoken out. And what you have to do is to understand how your interaction is looking to that person. So it shouldn't be required that psychology of it all is over here with the clinicians, and then there's this world that the survivor inhabits with professionals who aren't trauma-informed, because trauma-informed working is just an awareness and a methodology of how to work with survivors who are very frightened and nervous, or feel a bit hostile, or are suffering some dissociation, which is when they might move out of their reality for a bit, and you need to know how to gently bring them back. Or they might have panic attacks. And of course, if they have post-traumatic stress disorder, they might have flashbacks. Now, this all sounds quite overwhelming for many professionals, especially young people coming into this arena. But actually, after a lot of experience on the front line, finding out what works, I wrote a little book. It's available on the internet with my colleague, Dr. Katie Robjunt, who's an international clinical psychologist. And we wrote this book about how to just get things done in the world of working with survivors of trafficking. So how to build a relationship of trust quite quickly, because you need to do that as a professional, how to slow everything down and create the illusion of time when you're working with someone. One of the things that police I've spoken to actually benefit from is when they've learned this, creating the illusion of time, and they say it changed everything, because they don't realize that to somebody who is panicking or afraid or not used to being around people with such authority as this in their view, if everything slows down, it really helps them to understand what's being said. It's very reassuring, and that's what they need, and it can change everything. The same way if you walk into a room with someone, if somebody's been taken into a room and they've been raped in that room many, many times, including by people in authority, people wearing uniforms, walk ahead of them and show them the space and create as much space as you can. This is the kind of thing which, I think police and prosecutors were a bit surprised about at first, and now it's in the language, and how to make sure that you really focus on somebody's dignity when you're asking them about the most traumatic incidents. And that's really important. And another thing is medico-legal documentation, which is something we do at Helen Bamber Foundation, which is where somebody's injuries and psychological profile are professionally looked at by independent clinicians who are trauma specialists. And that way they can document everything about that injury and that trauma. And that can then go into a courtroom and not re-traumatize the victim again and again and again by going over and over this. Or, and this is something survivors I work with have, fearing it's going to come up. So even if you're not bringing it up, it's good, for example, to let them know exactly what the context is, who's working with them, who the interpreter is, who you are, why you're doing this, and the fact that trauma information is not going to be discussed here, or if it is, it's frameworked so they know what's coming up, because in their world, everything has been unpredictable, violent, violating, frightening, and unsure, and they're not used to asserting their needs initially. So expressing the interest in their comfort is really important to distinguish yourself from the traffickers and the relationships they've had before.
Rachel, you have mentioned in the beginning some erosion from the core international human rights norms and standards. Yeah. Also, we know that in the UK, theme of human trafficking has been predominantly linked to migration discourse, and it has been highly politicized. And the question would be, what problems do you see linked to being identified as a THP victim in this context, and also linked to the fundamental understanding of human trafficking is, as we said when Peter spoke, polycrime, organized crime, and economic type of a crime?
Yes, I mean, it's extremely unfortunate that what's happening at the moment in terms of the legislation that's happening in the UK. So as I said, I came into this before the UK had signed the European Convention, Council of Europe Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings. And then they finally signed it in 2007, ratified it in 2009, and then we got our national referral mechanism. I'm looking back on this period with rose-tinted glasses, because when you work in human rights, it's like having your foot wedged in a door that is permanently trying to slam. So you always feel like everything is really tough because you see the suffering that goes on the front line. But I have to say, there was progression. There was a system that was put up in the UK, a national referral mechanism, which was non-conditional, meaning that people could have access to support and provision regardless of whether they reported crimes to the police, which is the right way to go, because people need recovery and reflection, as we know, and a proper two-stage decision-making process. Then we had the Modern Slavery Act in 2015, which was quite strong on crime, probably not enough, but people were happy that we were making a lot of strides internationally with that act and talking to countries all across about that act. We had an anti-slavery commissioner put in, and things looked more positive. And then in 2020, the Modern Slavery Act, we helped, the government consulted with us, and we did some statutory guidance for it, which is the guidance that tells you how to look after victims and survivors from a multidisciplinary, multi-agency point of view. So this was going quite well. We've had Brexit, and I won't dwell too much on that, only to say that I think once you lose your friendships and your relationships and you turn away from those ties, even though you may remain with other ties like the ECHR, like the UN, like the UNHCR, Council of Europe, the falling away becomes easy, because since that time we've had the Nationality and the Nationality and Borders Act, and we've also had this shocking decision to send people who arrive, as they call it, illegally to claim asylum in the UK to Rwanda, where their cases will be decided in the Rwandan system. And then we had the victim regulations in 2022, which further moved away from the definition in international law of trafficking and moved towards a much stricter, much harsher way to identify people, which is a real problem, because as we were just saying, you have to take so much care with survivors just to allow them the space to be able to recover at all and to speak to you, that making anything harsher and more difficult is really problematic. And now we're facing the illegal migration bill, which is also known sometimes as the small boats bill, but it's actually, again, targeting people who have arrived so-called illegally in the UK to claim asylum, and simply not looking at their case at all, and not allowing them access to the national referral mechanism. And our international friends have spoken out against this. So Greta, which monitors the implementation of the Council of Europe Convention, the UNHCR, the Council of Europe, all of these people have said that this is not compliant with international law. And with that bill, unfortunately, our Home Secretary said, yes, it isn't compliant with ECHR, but I want it to go anyway. We want it to pass anyway. And unfortunately, this is terrible on the front line, the results of this. And there are many people who are against it, but this is a difficult time. And I think these things happen when people are looking the other way, because there's an economic crisis, there's there's the outcome of Brexit. There are, you know, strikes. There are all sorts of problems in the world and in the country. And we have to hold on to practice and what we're doing. And I think that's the key thing about multi-agency holding together, as you were saying, is preserving each other and ourselves, but also preserving the language that we have built over years and years of human rights, and not allowing the parameters of that language to narrow until we're speaking the language of a much lesser system. Do you know what I mean? And also it's incumbent on us as professionals in human rights to make it very simple, because it's a human subject. It's not actually a political subject to care about refugees and people who've been trafficked. It's very normal, and it should be communicated widely to the public in a way that they can really understand, because too many people think this is a specialist subject and trafficking is something else, when really it's all around us.
No, absolutely, indeed. I mean, it's also because there is this nexus being built with asylum and illegal migration, while you know, it can be perfectly well the nationals of your country. You don't have to cross international borders.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be an asylum seeker, and you'll be perfectly legally in the country. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
this is another problem, because there are many British nationals. It's one of the highest number of people who are trafficked in the UK. But all of our legislation on trafficking has gone in under illegal migration and that problem. So it's actually really overlooking victims of domestic trafficking as well.
Rachel, of course, you have been, despite all this that you have just said, and all these difficulties, and in certain moments maybe perceived even as windmills, as we called it in the headline, you have been continuing advocating for multi-agency response, multi-agency cooperation, teaching trauma-informed care for non-clinicians to police, prosecutors, judges across UK and also internationally. Can you tell us, in your view, how can joining forces between prosecutorial authority in particular and human rights defenders like yourself be the solution to somehow mitigating this windmill fight?
I think this is really important, because if you've been with survivors through any situation with the police and them talking about the crime that's happened to them with the police, and then waiting years and years and years as the situation goes on, and they're not incentivized in any way, because that's our system, but they are often living in poverty, in difficulty, they fear their traffickers, they're afraid of the process, they're hugely afraid. I mean, if you can imagine going from a situation where you're with people who have absolutely often tortured you and persecuted you and made you feel like nothing, because something people forget is the verbal abuse and threats that happen every day, and the insulting and all of this, and suddenly you're required to stand in a room full of highly educated people and speak about the people you're most afraid of, and you have to wait years to do that without getting further problems or re-trafficked. You need somebody with you, and you need them to be really, really supporting you all the way through it. So in the UK, we have a pilot system, which is fantastic, actually, which I think has been echoed in other systems, which is called the Victim Navigators Pilot. It was introduced by Justice and Care, an NGO in the UK. And basically it means that now when we have a survivor who wants to report a crime, they can report it to somebody who makes a bridge with the police, but is entirely anonymous, and can advise them about giving their report as a victim and doing the full, what we call achieving best evidence interview, or they can give anonymous information. And also they get time, that thing about time I was talking about. They don't have to make an immediate decision. They can go away, and, you know, as somebody supporting them, they can contact us to say, oh, I want to go ahead, or I don't want to go ahead, and no one will bother them. This is very successful, I think, and it's being done in Romania and Scotland as well. And I'm hoping it will take off, because it's so important. But you really need support throughout that whole time, not only from independent supporters and victim navigators, but also, you know, people in the criminal justice system. So, you know, when I've been in court, and it's rare, I have to be honest, there aren't many prosecutions and convictions of traffickers, unfortunately, but when I've been in court and the prosecutor has come to talk to the survivor and explain what they're going to do and how the court works. And, you know, the judge talks to them, and it's really, really helpful, you know, as well as special protection measures. You shouldn't have to apply for those. They should be absolutely standard for vulnerable witnesses and also vulnerable defendants. Because another thing, of course, is that many, many people are getting prosecuted, even in countries where there is a statutory defense and a non-prosecution principle, which mitigates it if they've been compelled to commit crimes. But nonetheless, so many people are not advised appropriately and go into prison for that reason, which of course creates additional vulnerability. So it is really important, yeah.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think this will like gradually transfer also the floor to our audience and to the questions from the audience. And I had in mind, when you mentioned the victim navigators pilot, I immediately had in mind something that I wanted to ask Barbara Benzi, who is a prosecutor from Milan here, on the concept of the confidential source of proven credibility. That may be someone who in the UK system may be called a victim navigator in a THB situation, where you would have this person who could be a human rights defender, who takes in the information, does maybe some extra work that a colleague from MBS and engineering who works with open source intelligence and you know, and analytics may be able to teach also to those who are the human rights defenders, and then come to you as a prosecutorial authority and say, look, I am a, you know, confidential source of proven credibility, and this is the situation we have learned from the victim and also from some work we have been able to do an extra. What would you do with that?
Thank you very much for. I think that in our framework and also in our Italian experience, we had still a lot of problems with the multi-agency approach. Because sometimes the judiciary and also the prosecutor and the police don't have a special training about that. So we don't have a navigator, as Alex said, but we try to work together in the court between prosecutor that normally work on violence against women, first of all, because we need more training also in this matter before trafficking, because in Italy also this is a main problem, a main cultural problem. And so that problem reflects also in approach in an investigation. In Milan, we have a group of multi-agency in which we involved the police, also the public services, and also university sometimes, because we have in the court some trainers, and these trainers from university have realized a program to receive people and witnesses for the hearings. And this is a little step to realize multi-agency, because sometimes this type of victims are alone outside the hearing, outside the court. And also during the trial, some judges and probably also some prosecutors aren't able to approach this type of victims in a good way. So thank you for this meeting. because from my point of view, is a moment to have, for me, to approach deeply the main problems. But I would like to communicate to you that in Italy we have a lot of works to do about multi-agency, because judiciary is a part, and the public social service is another part, and I give you my experience in a big public prosecutor office, and in this moment we don't have a lot of investigation in human trafficking, probably because in this moment in Milan is not, it's terrible, but it's not an aim, it's not a goal. Not for the judiciary, because we are mandatory to prosecute this type of crime, but we don't have referral, and I'm able to share with you this situation because I work there and I work on this type of crimes, and after our last meeting about on multi-agency, we realized that we had only 2 or 3 reports about victims in Milan. So thank you for the questions, but this is the reality, the truth. Sorry.
No, thank you, Barbara. I mean, absolutely interesting. If there is no referral, this means that there is no identification. So we go again back to what we have discussed about, polycrime. Do we see it for what it is? Are we able to see it? If, like Caroline Hoggy, that's your colleague from the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, says that if you want to go after THB, don't look for THB. Yeah, it may look as something else. And this may be a problem to why we're not seeing what's in front of our eyes. But with this comment, I would like to thank very much our speakers, and I would like to open the floor for the questions from the audience, both online and in presence.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to ask, with the human trafficking victims you've worked with, is it mostly those who were coerced into moving to other places to work, or those who were defrauded? So, for example, some of the traffickers may promise, they could even be registered agencies in the various countries, and would promise people that, okay, so we are going to get you a visa to do this, and then as soon as they get there, they seize their passport. So is it mostly those who were coerced, or those who went there willingly, but then things took a different turn?
Yes, I mean, many of the people we work with are abused because of their original vulnerability to trafficking. So there are many ways that they come into the country. They are often very deceived, but I do work with people, or we work with people who've had whole lives of slavery, starting in other countries and then moving around. Because, what I think is really important is traffickers will use that person for endless profit for as long as they can. So, that's one of the things I'd say about understanding it as a crime, is that when you are taking information about a crime where somebody's been in sexual exploitation, if they've been doing housework, cooking, cleaning, any of this, that's domestic servitude as well. These crimes need to add up. Do you know what I mean? And so there are many different ways that people are trafficked. And I think that deception plays a huge role, because it's easier to move people around. And then once you have, we also work with people who've been drugged in order to transport them around. But initially, it often starts with a relationship, which is either, from an organized crime situation where people are offered, agencies, work abroad, this kind of thing. But there are also many cases in which people literally just take the opportunity to put somebody into a trafficking situation because they can. So you have somebody who thinks, well, this person's homeless, vulnerable, has no immigration status. They're going to clean my house and they're going to, you know, look after my children. And I'm going to keep them there forever. And I'm going to lie to them about situations and stuff like that. So you have trafficking on so many levels, you know, and then you have this sort of blurring trafficking as well, where I say blurring because people go in on training in a nail salon, you know, and then they never get paid because they're still training after a year and a half doing free labor. So there's a lot of deception in trafficking, you know. There are people who are abducted, but that's far rarer in my own experience than that deception situation. Or fleeing. The other thing is we work not only with victims of trafficking, but victims of state torture and war and community violence. People who get into a smuggling situation, or they think it's a smuggling situation, and they have to flee their country, and then it turns into a trafficking situation. There's all sorts of overlaps with that as well. So, you know, there's many, many different scenarios. And as you were saying earlier, you have never seen this case before. It's an original case. Always look at it from the point of view that it's completely unique to itself. And I think that's really good advice, because if you are working with somebody, you may have seen this pattern or this trend in trafficking and this kind of trafficker before, but you have never seen this victim before. That they're new to you, and their whole life starts, all their relationships, everything you need to understand in order to understand how this process has happened to them.
There's a question online. I'll try to do one so that we are having some justice in approaching the questions. There's a question: how do you ensure the training of victim navigators in understanding the beliefs of victims that are part of their cultural background? This is, I think, for you, Rachel.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, one more time. How do you ensure the training of victim navigators in understanding the beliefs of victims are part of their cultural background?
That's an interesting question, because at the moment I'm working on a project that was a study at King's College London with partners, the University of Nottingham Rights Lab, the University of East London Survivor Alliance, and Helen Bamber Foundation. And this study was to find out from survivors what they needed in order to recover and for well-being and integration. So it was led by survivors with a high survivor participation. And when we looked into the core outcome set, which you can see if you follow the website on the bio, you know, survivors said, I want not only victim navigators, I want victim navigators who are survivor leaders, professionally employed survivor leaders, because the only people I would speak to when I came out were people from a survivor-led initiative or organization, because I just didn't feel confident around anyone else. So I have to relay that, because I think that would be a really good way to understand from the point of view of survivors how to proceed with that.
Thank you, Rachel. Any question from the floor? Alexandra, please.
Thank you both for being here. I had a question for Peter on the topic of polycrimes and the complexities that they introduce to prosecutions. So when prosecuting organized crime, at which point do you tend to notice trafficking as a factor? If you've seen there to be a trend there, or if you can just speak to some of the examples you've experienced in terms of when trafficking does come up or is suspected, and how can this interfere or alter the ongoing proceeding or trial?
Well, thank you for your question, but I will begin if we are talking about trafficking with human beings, and if is it not only just a simplified version, for example, for my country is that gypsy community use their own members of the family for sexual exploitation, and usually they use it for across the border to other country to be not so followed or not to be recognized in the community. If you're talking about serious trafficking with human beings, sometimes usually it's helpful to begin from the typical rule of how organized crime is organized. So the first one is the follow the money. If you find how to follow the money, you can find maybe a lot of crimes which is possible and imagine. It's sometimes about economical crimes. It is usually about money laundering. It is about bribery. It is about sometimes an extortion. And you can find a lot of other possibilities. And after that, you can recognize the trafficking with human beings. That is my experience from maybe the first big case, which was tackling the trafficking with human beings, because the complexity of the case was tackling to the exploitation for the labor. But unfortunately, it was maybe the first case which was so complex, which was before the court. And frankly, from my point of view, also the Chamber of Judges doesn't recognized or didn't recognize that it is trafficking, because they only just follow up for the economical crimes, which was inside, yeah. But we tried to simplify the case that why to gather the evidence, which we build the case one evidence by another evidence, and to show that it is an economical crime, which was time consuming. When we have a lot of testimonies, from this is absolutely clear that there was a manipulation with the victims, and there was paid very low, because it was a story that it was very expensive to get yourself from the Ukraine to the Slovak Republic, and we have some costs, and you need to work a lot as much as possible, because you need to pay us, because it was too much money for us. But it was month by month, and they have only out just a small amount of money. And there was a lot of people, other workers from the Slovak Republic, who helped them maybe buy some for eating, some water, such like this, yeah. So that was my experience. That okay, we need to also explain to the judges that it is not about just one crime which is visible, but there is usually a lot of crimes which is like different layers, and sometimes it's how to find the best approach to the case from the beginning, which able are for us to decide what to do. At that time, we have very small cooperation with NGOs, and we have no prepared victims for the interrogations, and they were very reluctant to cooperate with police, because they have own experience from other country that maybe most of the policemen was corrupted. So absolutely the first approach was that they don't believe us, they don't believe police. Police built the trust maybe a month, but after that it was also another experience that we traumatized them, because our system need to repeat this testimony. So it was a couple of times in pre-trial stage, and after that also before the court. And when they were in the same room with these perpetrators, they were not able to say anything. Despite we ask them if they need protection, despite we have measures to put them away, they were aware of to say it, that yes, I'm afraid, and please put this person away from the court hall. If we have a support from the NGOs, as we know now, and if this person will be prepared for this interrogation, it could be much more different. So that's an experience which is very painful, because there was over the 200 victims. Almost 200 of them was administratively expelled from the country, despite that they were victims. Yeah, it is true, because they broken the law, because they have no legal certificate for such works which was eligible for that contracts. But yes, at the first we tried to dismantle the organization. which was covered by some diplomats from Ukraine. There was a recognizable impact of other persons, which was across the administrations, but we have no testimonies and we cannot build a case further. And this is the approach. Now, with this experience which I have now, I will follow the money. The first, I will dismantle the money how was going between the subjects who was involved, and I will be asked the NGOs to prepare the victims to explain that this is the criminal procedure in Slovakia, and you need to do this, not to introduce them how to reproductive or how to talking about the story, only just to prepare. This is not against you. This is only just a situation where it is needful. You talk again about it, and please concentrate to the facts. Yeah, and this is for example, for these people, it was traumatizing to go to the police station, to go before the court, because they was afraid of because these people who was a perpetrator manipulating them. So that's a pity.
Yeah, but it's also, this is an old case. We're talking 2009. Also, many people, of course, had to go through the administrative procedure of a immigration detention facility. At that time, Ukrainian citizens still needed a visa to get in the country. They needed residence permit, working permit. Yeah, and of course, we touch here again on multiple, I would say, layers of THP. Yeah, so you have the victims who at the same time have broken the law, but they have not committed any offense. They have, there is an administrative offense of being irregularly in the country or not having it, but this is not any kind of a, criminal offense, so to say, per se. And we have non-punishment clause in the EU directive, even which says that you should not be punished for misdemeanors or crimes that have been there as a direct result of having been trafficked. So of course in 2009 we haven't had the EU directive, but we had something similar in the EU, in the Council of Europe Convention, which our country, Slovakia in that case, signed in 2005 and ratified in 2006. So in this very case, you would have an immigration police that sees the victims. This is okay, irregular, okay, immigration detention, okay, administrative expulsion, and then you would have a anti-mafia prosecutors say, okay, we need to hear those victims, but they're already in the Ukraine. We need to be searching them in the Ukraine. We need to be interviewing them. So as Peter said from the beginning, it was grasped in a way which has determined the outcome. Yeah, but of course, you see how many layers you would have in a case, plus high-profile traffickers. So involvement of Ukrainian consulate, Ukrainian of a prominent lawyer who was of a Ukrainian descent but Slovak national. So, I mean, these people were seriously intimidated. This was not, as Peter said, like simple, I mean, of course, you don't want to undermine any type of a fear, but these people were seriously intimidated. And very few of them eventually decided to cooperate. And the final conviction, if I'm not mistaken, was only for smuggling. Is this so? Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, but yeah, follow the money, I think would be the right one. We only have 3 more minutes to finish. There's one more question here, actually. I don't know who should have the precedence. Yeah, this is about the role of women in this type of crime, Peter, like women perpetrators, women not only victims, but women perpetrators. Very quickly on that, and then we can take last question and then we close.
Usually also the women are perpetrators in that cases, especially when we are talking about sexual exploitation. Sometimes the traffickers using these women as a person who are at the first contact and to are able to persuade the person to be involved in, so.
Please, your question from the floor. Was there some? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming out today. So my question is about hijacked states and the multilateral approach that Rachel was talking about. And I was wondering if you guys thought that or had any successful examples of a multilateral approach or reporting mechanism being implemented in a hijacked state and what that might look like.
You want to go? Joining forces with peers?
Not sure what the target of the question.
Do you maybe want to narrow it down?
Yeah, so I guess I was just wondering in hijacked states, what the main obstacle would be to like a national reporting mechanism or multilateral cooperation for trafficking, if it would be the national government, the foreign intervener, or like what that might look like.
Well, maybe I understand what you mean. Maybe that could be like a hostile and unfriendly environment, and maybe a lot of disciplinary action in case of prosecutors, intimidation in case of human rights defenders, maybe challenges that investigative journalists may be facing in trying to join forces together. It's like if you are operating in a hijacked state or in a compromised state, so to say, where rule of law agents are those who actually are not protecting the rule of law but are playing against you, then you would be trying to alienate those who have those values in the right place. And that may be a prosecutor, that may be a human rights defender, that may be a human rights lawyer, a journalist, a social worker, and you would try to complicate their work. So in case of human rights lawyer, you would be writing your submissions, you would be writing your appeals, and there would be the authority, be it whatever, police authority, prosecutorial authority, or judicial authority, who would say, no, the crime does not exist. Because there's some kind of pattern here, what's going on? In the case of a prosecutor, you may have, saying, you may have your own problems, which you have experienced throughout the years of working there in terms of whatever disciplinary action or saying,
it is possible to many things that you can be pressed down by the system, but it still it doesn't mean that you can not resist. Yeah, you can still find to do as properly as much as it possible, but sometimes it is undermining by your supervisors or other persons who are able to do it. But if you are cooperating with the people who are just leading the case, it is still possible because you have such a amount of evidence. At that time, it's quite difficult to drop the case if you have such an amount of the evidence. But if the case is more sensitive, also the press to the people is more visible, and sometimes not visible, but it is possible to feel it. You talk about the disciplinary measures, about to put more cases to the prosecutor or police officer to be overloaded, not to have to have time to do it a proper way, and just to control them for the other cases and to press him to do it more quickly, or the cases which you would like to put away. And also it depends if is it this entity, which is a prosecutor or police officer, is still fighting against the system and is still to do it appropriate way. Quite difficult to put the answer, but it's about the situation. But the system is working like this. I will press you, and the system is expected that you will give up. And if you still fight, it is something, what the hell is it? I can try to do anything else. It is still not working. And the system is also the shaking. Why is it not working? Because it was an order. You need to do it. No, I didn't do it. I just did it in an appropriate way. Again, the system is about to collapse, because how is it possible that chain of my command is not under my command? Yeah. So this is a way just to do it, the work for 100%, not less, not more.
Yeah. I can't answer to working in that context, but what I can say is that there are examples when we all did this NRM handbook, we put promising practices in the back from different countries across the world to show that every aspect of this book is being done somewhere. And there are really, really good examples of multi-agency working in certain areas. I mean, the ones I know about are Scotland. There's the Scottish government and the councils and the NGOs and the healthcare professionals meet and have a kind of MARAC response. Same in the West Midlands in the UK. It doesn't exist elsewhere. So what I'm trying to do at the moment with the project is to hold together practice, because practice is what it is. It's as good as it is. You can't narrow it or lie about it because people are doing it. So you're basically holding together as practitioners in all different sectors to learn about each other, because even in the same discipline, you work differently in different geographical locations. and also to understand about different disciplines, because in trafficking, health connects to police, connects to criminal justice, connects to immigration law. You've got to know all of it, so it's multifaceted. So I would say relationships are forming all the time in this area. NRMs are the way to position them, because this is like a blueprint for how to form either on a macro level or on a micro level, you know, whatever level you're going on, those connections can be made. And I think that's what's going to keep us all going.
Rachel, thank you so much. Peter, tremendous thank you as well. I just heard the bells announcing that it's 8 p.m. and it's 8:05 now. So I would like to thank to our audience, both in the room and online. And thank you again for being here today. All the best. Have a nice evening. And thank you, Sam.